What do I mean on my videos when I say, welcome to my splinter of the cross? What does it mean to have fellowship with Jesus in his sufferings? Hi, everybody. I'm Alice K. Ruckelhaus from SufferingWell, and I've been sharing with you about my autistic journey. I'm going to share with you something that's a little bit off that topic today that applies to all of us, but it has a lot to do with this whole thing of autism and why I'm sharing about it. It's up to you whether or not you fellowship with him. You're probably going to have that suffering regardless of whether you want to or agree to. So I've called this series, Welcome to My Splinter of the Cross. And the reason for that is because of a video that was done by Father John Ricardo. And we will link that in the description box below. We really encourage you to watch that. That was a video that brought me into this whole thing of offering up my suffering, of uniting my suffering to Christ. And in turn, it has influenced a lot of what we do through SufferingWell. Hopefully, we'll be able to tell Father John Ricardo sometime about how much he has influenced this ministry. But in this video, he said something that really caught our attention and our imagination. He said that Jesus offers us a splinter of his cross. That is such an interesting thing. And I just imagine Jesus offering that splinter, that little tiny piece of his cross, his great suffering. He offers us a little bit in comparison to his suffering. It seems like so much to us, but it's just a splinter of his cross, just a teeny tiny part of his cross. And I get to sit on that splinter and fellowship with him. In the book of Philippians, St. Paul said that I may know him and the fellowship of his suffering and the power of his resurrection. And I think we tend to focus on the power of his resurrection, which is really, really important. But so is the fellowship of his suffering. We don't like to focus on that quite as much because it's not as pleasant. There is a statue. I don't know where it is. I want to find out because I really would like to visit it someday. I'd probably spend days and days and days there just looking at it. But it's a statue of St. John Paul II carrying Jesus' cross with him, not carrying it for him, but carrying it with him. And the two of them, with the cross on their shoulders, the two of them are talking, and you can see that they're just so intensely involved in their conversation, but you also see that there's a lot of joy on their faces. And to me, that illustrates more than anything the fellowship of his suffering. If you're going to fellowship with somebody, you get into whatever it is that they're doing. You get into that with them. You spend time with them, intimate time with them, maybe over meals, maybe doing a project together, in this case, carrying Jesus' cross together, or in the case of Jesus offering a splinter of the cross, he's inviting us to share in the joy of his fellowship with him and to suffer with him. And so that's what I mean when I say, welcome to my splinter of the cross. This is what my splinter is like. You have a splinter of the cross that Jesus has invited you to, and it's up to you whether or not you fellowship with him. You're probably going to have that suffering regardless of whether you want to or agree to. But do you want to sit on that splinter of the cross and yell at him and be angry about your suffering? Or do you want to recognize that it's an opportunity to fellowship with Jesus, to share his suffering with him, and to learn from him? In Matthew, he says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. So whatever trial it is that you have, whatever cross it is that Jesus has asked you to bear, you're probably weary from it and you're burdened from it, because that's what burdens do, right? They burden us. And Jesus says, I will give you rest. It's kind of like he says, hop up here onto the splinter of the cross next to me and rest there, which is really hard to understand. How can you rest in your suffering? He goes on to say, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Learn from him. Learn how to be gentle. Learn how to be humble in heart. We're going to be talking about that a lot next year. And then he says that as a result, you will find rest for your souls. We will find rest in our sufferings. He says, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. It may not seem like the burden that you have right now is easy or light, but when we fellowship with God, it still is hard. It's a cross, you guys. It's a cross, or it's a splinter of the cross. So it still is hard. It still is painful. But as we're able to press into him, as we're able to turn ourselves toward him on the cross and fellowship with him in our suffering, in his suffering, then it becomes lighter and it becomes easier. One of the things I wanted to point out is that a yoke, he said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me. A yoke is what they put onto oxen to keep them together as a team. And, they're like pulling a plow or doing some kind of work. The oxen are not volunteering to do that. And it's probably not real comfortable to have that yoke on them. It's a big piece of wood that rests on their shoulders and it goes around their necks. And also, they lose control of their lives when they have that yoke on them. They have to work together as a team. Okay, they have to turn the same way at the same time. And there's a person back there working the plow who is controlling their every move. When we put Jesus' yoke on us, when we yoke up with him, okay, we sit on the splinter of the cross, we fellowship with him, we take his yoke upon us, we become partners with him. And we start turning the same direction that he does. And he controls us. Ultimately, that's what we want as Christians. And that is when our burden becomes easy and light, and our suffering becomes fellowship. I can't say that I'm there yet, but that's what I really, really hope for. That is to me one of my greatest hopes in life, is to be able to fully be yoked with Jesus, to sit on my splinter of the cross, to not turn away from him and complain about it and be angry, but to turn towards him and have that time of fellowship. I want to be like St. John Paul II in that statue, carrying Jesus' cross with him and fellowshipping with him. Doesn't that sound great? Don't you want that too? Okay, I love you all. I'd really love to hear from you what you think about this and what questions you have, what we can probably learn so that we can share it with you, because we're certainly not experts in this, but we're learning a lot. And your questions help us to learn even more. So we appreciate them. All right, we love you all. Bye-bye. I'll see you next time.